So what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're here with Mr. John Garland. He's an attorney out in the Dallas area, and he wants to speak to us today about estate planning. Now, I'm going to make it a little simple. He's going to help us not to, when something happened to us, not go to GoFundMe and ask to help for funerals. So, John, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for having me.
All right, John, you've been, kind of communicating with us about estate planning. What is planning in the state? Because some people may not know that terminology.
Absolutely. So maybe just to back up a little bit and just talk about what an estate is, right? I think that's always, you ask the average person, they don't know what an estate is. They hear it in popular media and they think like how much money you're worth. Basically, your estate is everything that you own, everything that you may have legal entitlement to. It could be heirlooms, anything that you have value. So we take all of that, and that's what we call your estate. And we can talk a little bit later about the difference between, community property and separate property, because all those things really make up your estate too. But estate planning is we take your estate and we try and forecast two major events in your life. One of which is what we always think about estate planning is death, right? What do you do and how do you prepare for how your estate's going to be broken up when you die? But the second one I think most people don't necessarily think about is incapacity. And that's that situation where, you have a degenerative disease, like maybe Alzheimer's, your parents are getting older, they can't take care of themselves, things like that. So what we do in estate planning is we take everything that you own and try and figure out the best way possible to make sure that those assets aren't lost or degraded or your quality of life doesn't change as you get older or when you die, that your family is able to maintain and keep a lot of that legacy and heritage. And I think in the African American community, that's needed more now than ever.
Right. So you mentioned this, you said a parent that maybe have, Alzheimer's or dementia. So let's say they diagnose, with that and they say, okay, if I can't, turn this around, then let me go ahead and start doing this right now. That way, when I can't really do it no more, I don't have to worry about kids fighting or anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I actually had a client just recently come in and they were asking like, are we coming in too early? Is this something that we need to deal with later? And I said, honestly, we often think about that when we get older, we're going to have that issue. But a lot of times we don't even think about like I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I could get strangled out by the police tomorrow and not be able to take care of myself. And so what we tend to do is take that estate and make sure that in the event that does happen, yes, it's already put in place and you're not having to try and scramble and figure things out. I think the sad thing that happens a lot of times is I'll get a phone call from families and basically they'll say something to the effect of, my mom has Alzheimer's, can we get a power of attorney or can we get, some estate planning done? And at that point, it's really limited because at that point, their mind might be already too gone to really meet the testamentary intent that we talk about in estate planning to say that, yes, this will be legally binding. So we want to do it as early as possible in the event something does happen.
Right. And that's very, very important because, I definitely know, a little bit about that. And like I said, families just sometimes, if you don't have, decent family members, I'm going to say,
I call those the creepy cousins, the creepy and crazy cousins, the ones that...
They don't have to be creepy cousins. It could be just, a sibling, like a mom, like the brother, the sister, whatever. Because, unfortunately, in different families, some of them just not on the up and up, unfortunately, when you have a parent in that condition. Yeah. So, you mentioned, estate planning. Now, is that similar to life insurance or you help people with life insurance as well?
So life insurance is something different, and I know that life insurance is real popular in our community. Just historically, I think we were one of the big driving forces with life insurance policies. Estate planning is actually very different. Life insurance policy can be a part of the estate plan. So, Phil, let's say you have a life insurance policy, and you come to me as an estate planning attorney. I'm going to say, okay, let's just be sure that life insurance policy is up to date. But a lot of times people use life insurance policies to kind of avoid the probate process, which is that court process that will validate a will and other assets in your estate. But yeah, life insurance is a different thing. And I think most estate planning attorneys kind of shy away from life insurance policies just because sometimes they can be a gamble. Sometimes they don't necessarily account for a lot of the intrinsic items in your estate that really mean a lot, such as, like, again, the jewelry, the car, things like that. I think a lot of Black people use life insurance policies to accumulate cash value for things like that. But estate planning is a little bit different, and I think it's a little bit more granular, more detailed in terms of all of your stuff cumulative, what's going to happen to it when you die. Life insurance is more or less like, again, that payout, making sure that there's a financial revenue for your family when you die.
Yeah, so basically, what you're doing is similar to what we've seen on like different TV shows or whatever. Old man died. A lot of times, the old white man he dies,
Sure.
and then he says, "Okay, well, he's going to leave X amount of dollars to you. He's going to give you the
Right.
house. He's going to give
Right.
this." And
Exactly.
some attorney reads it to the family. Is
Yeah,
that
that, you know what's funny? I haven't done that just yet. That is one of those big moments where, as an estate planning attorney, you're waiting for someone to call you in that mansion, and you unlock the envelope, and you know the family's sitting in front of you, and you go, "Okay, John, Uncle Jeff wanted you to have the this and this and this and this." But you know, in reality and day to day, most people, especially in our community, do informal estate planning, and I think we have a long history of that. It goes back to slavery, I think. I was actually talking to a colleague, and we were just talking about the irony that estate planning, you know, leaving things in your will, trying to maintain generational wealth and property. You know, sadly, we have a history of our first encounter in this country with estate planning, where we were the property, right? We were in people's wills, and that's the real sad truth of it. But ever since then, I think that we're a very family-oriented people, and so we do a lot of informal estate planning. A lot of times I call it holiday estate planning. Well, what that looks like is, you know, you're sitting down at the holiday table, and grandma looks at you and says, "Now, you know, when I die, this house, I want you to have it. I don't want your brother to have it. I want you to have it. I want you to take care of it." Or, you know, tell your sister she gets the pearl earrings. I don't want the other cousin to get them. And we get a lot of, you know, we do a lot of that. But unfortunately, in today's society, you know, especially as Black wealth is dwindling, we have to really be able to say that this is going to be legally binding and hold up if there is an issue, and that it has to go to some sort of court to determine whether or not it's legitimate or not. Informal estate planning is a good thing. It allows us to think about it, but I think Black people now have to go forward and really put that in some, you know, in paperwork, basically.
Now, let me tell you one big issue in the Black community, and you was mentioning, you know, things. I think about land, and you know,
Yes.
there's some Black people that have had land in different areas, you know, the country, and then the moment they pass away, it's turned over to their children, and then their children like, "Oh shoot, I'm gonna sell it and get rid of it,"
Right.
this happens a lot in the Black community. Now, in an estate planning consultation, or can you put that down? Could you also put down, like, listen, I, you know, can turn over the land to this particular child, but they cannot sell it. Can that be in
Yeah.
there, or can you say if you're going to sell it, it has to be, the proceeds has to be given away to some, you know,
Sure.
maybe you know, a charity or whatever you want to give it to. But in other words, you can't sell it and benefit off of it if you're going to sell it.
You know, Phil, it's funny you mentioned that. Before I answer that question, I actually have a personal story about that. So what actually got me into the estate planning aspect of practicing law was I started 2014-15, I think, was a real turning point for all of us in terms of trying to soul search. And so I started really looking into the family history, and in that, I realized that we actually did own land at one point. Like after Reconstruction, my family owned some land out there in East Texas. And exactly what happened, what you said happened. The owner died, and his siblings could not in any way agree as to who was going to take care of it, who was going to pay the taxes on it. And so they didn't do anything to it, and it just went back to the state. So, you know, sadly, we lost land. That could be in my family right now. We could be, you know, that's something that could have been, I could inherit and pass down to my child. But in terms of bringing that kind of situation into an estate plan, absolutely. In Texas, you can make your will more or less what you want it to be. So sure, if you wanted to pass down land and say, hey, this land goes to this particular family member, conditioned on that they don't sell it or that they sell it for market value, because, you know, we also get into those situations, right, where you leave it to somebody and they need money tomorrow, and someone swoops in and says, I'm gonna give you 50% of what it's worth, and there goes the land. So you can actually, yeah, if you come in as a client and say, hey, is there some conditions I can put on this? Absolutely. That's something that we can do. Absolutely.
Okay, and also, I've also heard, in certain, we talk about more so with white people, of course, because, black people, I know some of them do it, but, I've heard situations where, a person pass away and, they'll say, okay, well, if this particular child get this particular education, then they can get so much percent of the company, but if they don't get this education, they get nothing. Have you heard people doing things like that?
Yeah, you know what, and you can do that. I think there are certain areas in the law that you can't do that. There are certain caveats to the law where you can't make that condition. But no, there are certain conditions saying that if you want to inherit this particular thing, you inherit it with these circumstances and conditions attached to it. So if you want the family house, then you got to graduate college. When you graduate college, the house is yours. If you don't graduate college, then it goes to someone else. And family members typically are aware of that because that's a driving force behind a lot of what they do. So yeah, if grandma owns a house that she bought in the 60s, she's paid it off, and she said, listen, I wanted to go to my grandson, but he's 14 right now. I don't want to give it to him until he gets married, then we could put that in your will. Or I want him to get a master's degree. When he does, on the day he gets it, it's his, so on and so forth. Yeah, so you can definitely tailor a will for the most part in a way that allows you to at least feel comfortable that your family's not going to squander that wealth.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think more of us need to think about that. A lot of times, we pass away and we don't have like no control over the legacy that we left, and it just I think this will cut out a lot of fighting with families because they all want to fight for this, fight for that, and they say it gets real nasty a lot of times when people pass away. Like I said, especially in our community, sometimes we just contest it with each other on a good day. And like I said, I keep bringing this up because it's so much land that was been given to us by your grandfather or great grandfather or grandmother, and they had this land for so long, and then we just go and just sell it and go buy a Cadillac and think we got something, or so now some Mercedes or whatever. And that just really bothered me that we give away our legacy like that.
Yeah, and I think we confuse. Again, I think part of this is social programming. We are engineered to not place value on those things. We place value right now on those more immediate tangibles. Again, like, oh, this will let me get a car. If I sell this piece of land, then I can get myself a house in the suburbs or whatever, not realizing that the land is more valuable than a condo or whatever. So absolutely, and it's a difficult situation because there's a lot of education, especially among the younger generation, on how to place value on things that I think that our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation, I think they inherently had a better understanding of the value of things and why you have to keep these things in the family and that history and that legacy. I think it's something that's kind of being lost on our generation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And just basically what you're saying, that's even, I like, what I'm hearing, that you can literally control, what goes on, even, when you out of here, you're not here anymore. Because sometimes, our kids sometimes need some structure sometimes, and they do need, some conditions, I think, in order to get certain things.
And Phil, to say, I think most people don't even understand what happens when you don't have a will. I think that's also a big part of the confusion. I think when I talk to people, it's sort of polarized. It's either, oh, if I don't leave a will, then who cares? And then the other half is, if I don't leave a will, then the state gets everything that I own, and which is not the case at all. I think people don't realize how much control you can have, even over the smallest things. If I built a coffee table that I love to death, and that is the biggest thing in my life, that I can pick who gets it versus trying to rely on the state to pick who gets it. Because when you die without a will, that's exactly what happens. When you die without a will, one of two things happens. Either the family tries to scoot it under the rug, especially if the estate is small, they'll say, well, let's just not mention it. If the creditors call, no one answers the phone, you take the car, you take this, and hopefully we won't disagree. But as you know, we always disagree. There's always some family argument, things get nasty, and then it ends up in a probate court. And at that point, that's when the state steps in and says, someone's going to assess the value of the property, someone's going to assess the value of the estate, and none of y'all get a pick as to what y'all get. We, at that point, determine what everyone gets. So if you don't like your brother and you don't want him to get some of your estate, then you better leave a will, because otherwise he's going to get something.
Yeah,
That's a fact.
I'm glad you said that, because some people don't realize, that until they actually go through it. I'm pretty sure when people watch this, they're going to be typing comments like, oh yeah, I've been through that. And so, those people that say, okay, now you got them interested, so what is the process? They come see an attorney like you, and then, is it an easy process, or how's it going to go?
So it can be a very easy process. It just depends on how much planning you have. And it's funny you mentioned that, and it's a good segue. So I've been trying to educate the Black community. Again, there's a certain level of education. It's hard because, again, just being able to interface with the Black community is extremely difficult at times because we're so localized. But, platforms like this really help me get the word out. So I made you can download it on my website at www.garlandestateplanning.com. It's garlandestateplanning.com. And under the resource tab, there's a free document. And what it is, it's a guide. It's just a lot of questions that you want to ask your parents, that you want to ask a loved one. That unto itself is a great place to start estate planning, because those are things where you're asking, do you have life insurance? Do you have health insurance? Are you on Medicare? Are you on Medicaid? Do you own property? Things like that. So by the time you come to me, you already have most of that already answered, because those are questions that I'm going to ask you, right? I'm going to say, Phil, okay, so what do you own? What is your estate? We have to figure out what your estate is first. If you own property, then I'm going to ask you, what state is it in? Is it in Texas? Where is it? Have you had it valued? Who's on the deed? It's a lot of detailed work, but the more you know going in, the less time I have to put into it to get you a proper estate plan. But it can be very easy. And I think for most people, it's extremely easy, because most people, they come in and what they want is, how are my kids going to be taken care of? And I just want to be sure that none of my property goes to family members that I don't like. Very rarely is it like, oh, I own this house in Idaho, I own this house in Oklahoma, grandma's got some stocks over here. It's a very simple process. For those who have simple estates, it's a very simple process. So you come to me, we work together in terms of figuring out what your estate is. And then we figure out, what do you want to do during life to control that estate? And that's when we start talking about the whole guardianship stuff. We start talking about power of attorney, if you become incapacitated. But most people really just want to plan about death. And I think, again, that's the hardest thing to talk about, but it's also the simplest thing, because it's really, most people say, oh, I just want everything to go to my spouse and I want my kids to have the rest. It's a very simple process. So once that happens, once I have an idea of what you want, I make those documents, and that's it. At that point, you put them in a drawer and you don't have to worry about them I think people don't understand how simple it really is. Once you do it, it's pretty much done until you need to update it.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the updating, because it was in my mind, like amending it. Let's say like you have another grandchild, or you want to say, you know what, I need to change that. I want to take this person off of it. Then you have to bring the document back and just amend that.
Yeah, so a few things about a will. You can amend a will. Sometimes, depending on the scope that you want me to change it, I might as well just say, hey, let's just go ahead and write a new will. Because a change to a will is called a codicil. And again, if you're not careful in how you do it, when that will is subject to probate, when you die and they have to authenticate it, it can complicate things. So sometimes it's just easier and cheaper to actually just start fresh and update the will as a whole new document. But yeah, it's a fairly simple process. It's just time consuming, and the burden is on the person to make sure that they are updating it.
Right. So, John, you gave us the website where people can download a form and they can fill out before they come. But how can people get in contact with you, especially those who live in the Dallas area, who's probably watching and say, man, I want to go see that brother, because I don't want no issues when something happened to me, or maybe, a person's up in age and they don't want to, they know some of their kids can get unruly.
So actually, the best way to get with any attorney is actually their website, because if you go to my website, again, it's garlandestateplanning.com. You can go to request a free consultation, and I am more than happy. You don't have to actually live in Dallas. I have a 110% virtual office, which lets me deal with clients in Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas. So really, it's just a matter of requesting a consultation. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to do that, and we can talk about whatever aspects of your estate you're having some problems with or concerns you may have, or if you just want to start fresh estate planning services, we can do that too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you contact, the brother here, John Garland, because like I said, we have to think about things like that. I know some of us don't like to, but we don't want the state, dividing different things up. Also the same thing we talk about is definitely the GoFundMe funerals. We need to take care of things a lot better because it's a burden on our children and family if something happened to us, and we can make it a lot easier while we're here. So, John, thank you for joining us on the show today. We greatly appreciate you giving us the education that we so need on estate planning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.